Hi everybody, welcome to AQA English Language Paper 2 Question 4 revision, and today I aim to give you some top tips on how to approach this question and what it's really asking you to do. So there are 4 main bullet points we need to keep in mind. Number 1, you need to look for the differences. Now for some of us it's quite difficult because we're thinking we've got 2 extracts on the same topic, so be it on childhood or on weight loss, whatever the topic is, it will be the same topic. However, there will be different attitudes, different opinions towards that same topic. So instead of thinking, am I comparing two completely different topics, for example, apples and oranges, you're actually comparing 2 different apples. So you've got 2 different extracts on childhood. You're not comparing childhood versus adults. Okay. Number 2, quotes. I want to find lots of short relevant quotes across your paragraphs to prove to the examiner that yes, you have read both extracts and yes, you have looked for differences. And then methods means language and structure. What is language? Things like similes, metaphors, repetition. And what is structure? The way something is organized and how the writer has begun his or her extract and how they've ended the extract and any changes in between. Effect on the reader is incredibly important. If you forget to mention how the reader is affected, what the reader learns from each extract, you are basically shooting yourself in the foot. So, just to visually help you remember the paper, what I've placed here is an image that sums up the paper. You will have 2 extracts on the same theme. So, for example, here it's being lost in the middle of nowhere. However, from different perspectives. One is from the perspective of someone stranded on an island, and the other one is on the perspective of someone stranded at sea. So English Language Paper 2 Question 4, this is what the question will typically look like. Compare how the 2 writers convey their different attitudes to, and it could be whatever, it could be childhood, it could be obesity, it could be sports, but the bullet points remain the same. Compare their different attitudes, the methods used, and support your ideas with quotes from both extracts. So let's look in detail at the success criteria. If you don't use comparison connectives, you're really letting yourself down, and that can be easily stopped. All you have to do is Google a list of comparative connectives such as on the other hand, nevertheless, however, and so on, to add to the beginning of each paragraph to point out to the examiner, hello, I am pointing out the differences through these comparison connectives at the beginning of each paragraph. Number 2, methods. You need to know your language techniques, you need to know your literary terms, you need to know your structural techniques, okay? So start revising those. A range of short quotes and a clear understanding of the writer's different attitudes, the writer's different opinions to the same topic. Language. This is essential, so I'd like you to remember this image of a paintbrush and how it brings things to life in writing forms. So language techniques are things like metaphors, personification, and all of that jazz. But you really get marks for explaining to me how a language technique has been used to communicate the writer's opinion. You do not get marks for telling me there's a simile being used. Okay, so what? Well done, you've found a simile. That's not going to get you the mark. The mark is actually achieved when you explain what the writer's trying to tell us. What is their opinion because of the use of these techniques? And the methods don't stop there. We also have structural techniques. So structure is the way something's organized. You have beginning, middle, end, changes of focus. That means when we move on from one line to another to look closely at a particular thing. Narrative techniques, narrative tense, and all of that loveliness that I will talk to you in detail later on. But let's look at a snippet. Let's look at a snippet, mini mock as it were, of Language Paper 2. Now Language Paper 2 has 2 whole extracts, but today I think in a few minutes let's just look at these 2 snippets and compare and contrast the following. Mock question below. Compare how the 2 writers convey their different attitudes towards dealing with fearful circumstances. The fearful circumstances here is that of climbing mountains. Okay, that's the similarity. But we need to find the different opinions, the different attitudes. So one extract is an interview with Sir Edmund Hillary, one of the first climbers to reach the summit of Mount Everest. On the other hand, source B is an autobiographical representation of Isabella's life and how she felt when she was climbing the American Matterhorn. So, language, let's start off with that. I've simply highlighted some words in red, and I'd like you to tell me what language techniques have been used here. Yep, go on, go on, have a little read. I never climbed up anything one step at a time. You read so much about how, at extreme altitudes, you take one step and then you stop and pant and puff for a while, and then take one more step. I don't ever remember doing that. So he's trying to tell us through the imperative verbs take, read, and so on, that the members of the public, referred to as you and you take, you read, you stop and pant and puff, they're referred to as very different to Sir Edmund Hillary because he found it really easy. I don't remember panting and puffing while climbing. I don't remember ever doing that. So immediately we've got this divisive tone between the members of public and Sir Edmund Hillary. He comes across as being very confident and actually proud of having been able to climb the mountain in such an effective manner. On the other hand, if we look at source B, what's the fearful circumstance again, people? It's that of climbing a mountain, the American Matterhorn. And she mentions, as we crept, look at that reference to that verb crept, that dehumanizing verb crept. So what are the connotations of that word? What does it suggest about her self-confidence, her strength? Is there any strength? No. In comparison to Sir Edmund Hillary, we have a female writer who conveys to us her fear of having had to climb that mountain. Let's continue. I beheld. Yeah, she's just referring to looking. I beheld what made me perfectly sick and dizzy. So just looking at the American Matterhorn, that sensory language communicates that fear that she experienced. Do we have here that sense of emotive fear? Do we have any emotional language techniques in source A? Or do we have far more emotive language techniques in source B? And what's the message? The message is that it was an incredibly fearful circumstance, that it was life-threatening. And then we'll look closely to the way in which the writer is using these oxymoronic phrases. We've got perfectly sick, smooth, cracked face. So you can see here that this juxtaposition, this repetitive juxtaposition, seems to reiterate how she at once was mesmerized by the beauty of the mountain, and yet she felt her life was threatened by it as well. So it was an incredibly fearful circumstance. However, for source A, it was an enjoyable circumstance, one where he felt in control. So as I said before, this is structure. Just to mention, structure is the use of words and how they are arranged, in what order and why. And if they're repeated, it's called, like a repeated particular image, it's called a motif. And then you have sentences. What type of sentences and punctuation marks have been used? And we can see immediately that source B uses a very long, an incredibly long, complex sentence to communicate her fear of that American Matterhorn. On the other hand, source A has several short sentences to communicate the divisive attitude he has between members of the public and his own skills of climbing. Let's move on. So that's structure for you, and obviously paragraphs. And I'm going to end this video now with the full question in front of you. Part 2, I will be going through the sources again with few more words, and then with some notes, as you can see here, and then I will be giving you an example answer, and then that will swiftly allow us to move on to preparing you for question 5, paper 2. So I hope you found this video useful. If so, please subscribe and like, and I will continue to create videos to help you, and good luck.